On Tech News Today, Google's planning to replace its Nexus line of phones with a new Android Silver program. And as the dust settles on Microsoft's acquisition of Nokia's phone handset business, new details about both the future of Microsoft phones and the future of Nokia emerge. And Samsung unveils a new camera phone that's a lot more camera than it is phone. All that and more coming up next.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Tuesday, April 29th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used Apple and Android devices are worth at Gazelle.com. And by ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter makes hiring faster, easier, and cheaper. Post your job to 50-plus job boards with one click. Try ZipRecruiter for a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Mike Elgin.
And I'm Jason Howell.
Tech News Today explores the big stories of the day with some of the world's best journalists. Our guest co-anchor today is Harry McCracken. Harry is editor-at-large for Time and the creator and author of the Technologizer blog. Welcome, Harry.
Hey, Mike.
It's good to see you on. I've really been enjoying some of the reports you've been doing lately. You have a tendency to do something that I find very interesting, which is that some company will announce some news, and then lots of people will cover it in brief because it's just a product announcement or some little thing. And then you cover it, but you bring in all kinds of context and background and unique information and reveal how interesting the story actually is. And I just find it fascinating that you're able to do that so consistently.
Thank you. I just definitely try to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And thank you so much for being on today. Let's jump right into the news. We have some very interesting news, especially for Android fans. Google plans to replace its Nexus line of phones with a new branding and new concept for how the phones get built. In an exclusive on The Information, senior reporter Amir Afradi said that the new Android Silver handsets will be high-end phones built by multiple handset makers to Google's exacting specifications. Amir Afradi joins us now to talk about his exclusive. Welcome, Amir. So, Amir, how is the Android Silver strategy different from the Nexus strategy?
Well, the Nexus program was always very niche, right? And it was mainly benefiting the companies that were participating in it because they got to go live inside of Google for a few months, work with the Android team, really create a good device, and then they could go actually and do their own device later that had nothing to do with Nexus. So like the LG G2, for instance, is, I'm sure, taken a lot of learnings from the Nexus phones that LG has worked on with Google. But now, it's really about selling devices in high volumes in stores. Nexus was sold mainly online, right? Always a niche thing, didn't sell that much. And Google really wants to take greater control of the ecosystem, particularly dealing with issues like bloatware, dealing with issues like component fragmentation, and dealing with Samsung, frankly, trying to find a way to benefit non-Samsung Android makers in a way that creates multiple powerful players in the ecosystem, so it's not all controlled by Samsung. They did want Samsung to participate in this program, but as you might expect, Samsung views it as a very big threat to have numerous premium Android phones out there that compete with Samsung's line of Galaxy phones.
Now, who are the likely candidates? You mentioned that Samsung is unlikely to participate, at least initially. Who are some of the companies that might be on board right from the get-go?
So we get into a lot of these details in the piece, which you should check out on theinformation.com, but definitely we know that LG is on board for this. There are going to be a lot of other good candidates. There are plenty of companies out there that do phones in high volumes, but maybe don't have a premium consumer brand and would like more of one. There are plenty of Chinese OEMs that kind of fit that bill. But the companies that have made an effort to create a consumer brand and a high-end phone, like a Samsung, like a Sony, like an HTC even, despite the fact that it's struggling mightily, they are not the best candidates for this because they would view this as competitive with their current offerings. It's really important to mention here that the wireless carriers are a key part of this program. This is all about spending hundreds of millions of dollars or more to create these kiosks within wireless carrier stores and really train people to sell these Android Silver devices directly to consumers. These devices are supposed to be special, right? They're supposed to be really good. And I think that, we're going to see a lot of interesting features such as waterproofing and personal voice recognition and all sorts of things like that to make these devices stand out. But it's going to be, a really big effort. You are definitely going to hear a lot about this over the next year or so.
Now, to me, this is kind of tragic news if this is, in fact, going to replace the Nexus line. The Nexus line was kind of like a tinkerer's phone. It was very open. People could mess around with it. It's very low cost, very bare bones, not particularly elegant, but for hardware hackers or programmers or anybody who wanted a phone that they could really play with, the Nexus phones were perfect for that. Why do you think it is that they don't have both the Android Silver and the Nexus lines in tandem?
Well, I don't know about how they will sort of phase out the Nexus side of this. But as you know, LG was working on a Nexus 6 device, and now this new program came about, and they sort of had to change their plans. One thing we don't know much about is the tablet side. Obviously, there's the Nexus 7 and the Nexus 10 out there. And, my understanding right now is that the Silver program focuses mainly on phones. As you know, phones are getting bigger and bigger. There are phablets, right? And so I don't know that there's going to have to be a specific emphasis on tablets there. But I think, Nexus is great. Nexus is definitely played a very, very useful role. But like I said, it was mainly for the benefit of these OEMs to get really good at making Android devices. And these things did not sell very well in the retail market. There will always be tinkerer phones, right? And that's what Android is all about. I'm sure there'll continue to be Google Play versions of these devices. But this is really about getting serious about selling devices in high volume and starting to make some money off of Android. I mean, Android is not a huge business in and of itself for Google. It's, a lot of people have these phones. They don't really use them that much for apps and services and other things. That's well documented, right? The iPhone user is a user that is more tech savvy, has more money, is doing more things. They want to target those users who can do that and really show people the capabilities of these phones so they can generate more revenue.
And you mentioned in your piece that in exchange for these companies going along and doing things Google's way, Google's going to invest a lot of money in promotion and stuff, up to $1 billion, I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very serious effort, and that's really the carrot here is marketing support. This has actually been a really big issue for the past couple of years as Samsung has risen up. You have a situation where a lot of these other companies like HTC, they've gone to Google and said, guys, please help us. We're getting killed out there. We cannot possibly keep up with Samsung, which is just covering the airways with ads. What can you do to help us? And Andy Rubin, the prior head of Android until the beginning of last year, he's a very Darwinistic approach. So he said, okay, well, only the strong will survive. And we will have this Nexus program that will help companies like LG and Asus and others to compete. But now you have a situation where Sundar Pichai is the leader. He's much more of a willing to listen kind of a person, has a lot more empathy for such partners. And I think he's been a bit more open to finding ways to help them. It can be argued that this program is not an ideal way to help those companies that really want to have a strong brand, because you have to basically submit to very stringent requirements. You can't do a lot of bloatware, or you can't do customization of software like these companies like to do. So you're kind of a bit more commoditized. I think that's the fear, and that's why this program is probably best for those companies that are frankly not huge consumer brands right now and have not invested a lot in that.
And I suspect they're going to find that the phones, in addition to being subsidized with all this branding help by Google, are going to be very popular because people seem to love Google Play Edition phones and Nexus phones because they don't have the bloatware, because they have an emphasis on the Google apps, which are excellent on all platforms. So that'll be an interesting development. And as I understand from your story, this is expected to come out sometime next year, but we don't have anything solid on that. Amir Afradi, I want to thank you for coming on Tech News today. And once again, excellent scoop.
Thanks very much.
All right, you can find Amir Afradi at theinformation.com and also on Twitter at Amir, A-M-I-R. Well, in just a sec, we're going to catch up with what's happening with Microsoft and Nokia in the wake of Microsoft's acquisition of Nokia's handset business. But first, I want to tell you about Gazelle. Gazelle will buy your used gadgets and give you pretty good money for it, too. Essentially, how you use Gazelle is you just go to gazelle.com, Gazelle.com, find the item you'd like to sell to Gazelle, your used iPhone or tablet or gadget, and tell them how good of condition it's in, whether it's in good condition, bad condition, whatever. They'll even buy broken iPhones and tablets, and they'll give you a price. That price is good for 30 days. Now, of course, the value of devices like this are dropping all the time, so you want to go there right away, lock in the price, and that'll be honored for 30 days. They'll send you a box and a sticker inside the box. You just put the phone in the box, you put the sticker on the outside of the box, put it back in the mail, off it goes, and you get paid by check, PayPal, or you can get a 5% more money by using the Amazon gift card option. That's the one that I choose when I use Gazelle. So just go to gazelle.com now and put in your offer for your Android or Apple product. It's risk-free in multiple ways. One of them is that they will wipe your data free. So if you have personal information somewhere on that phone, they'll take care of it and completely erase it so that nobody can recover that information. Gazelle has paid more than $100 million to over 700,000 customers. Shipping is free. Processing is fast, and there are no listing hassles at all. So find out what your Apple or Android device is worth. Take a minute, go to gazelle.com to find out, and do it now because your device may lose value the longer you wait. Well, Nokia named Rajeev Suri as its new CEO. When Nokia sold its mobile handset business to Microsoft, it also handed over CEO Stephen Elop, who's already running Microsoft's Devices and Services Group. In related news, Elop clarified recent reports, including one that we had here on Tech News Today, around the branding of Microsoft's handsets. He said that the name of the handset division was Microsoft Mobile Oi only for legal reasons related to the merger, and that the name Microsoft Mobile Oi will not be seen by consumers. And they also won't use the Nokia brand. The branding for Microsoft's future handsets has not yet been decided by the company, so we'll see how that goes. But so as the dust settles, Harry McCracken, on this, on the acquisition of the mobile handset business by Nokia, of course, Nokia being best known for its handsets for many, many years. What do they have left? They have this this NSN cellular equipment business. They're kind of a networking company that competes outside the consumer marketplace, and of course Suri is something of a turnaround artist, and he was the former head of that division. Now he's a head of the whole company, which is now dominated by that division. What do you think is next for Nokia? What kind of company do we have here, and what are their prospects for success in the future?
Well, they do a lot of stuff that consumers don't really need to care about, but they did keep a hold of one pretty significant thing, which is their mapping group, which has this brand called Here, and is really one of the few companies in the world that truly does serious mapping and has all the data you need to do real good turn-by-turn stuff. And I think there's a lot of potential in that group. And sometimes people talk about whether Nokia might spin that off, but it's definitely Here is a brand to watch, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with that now that they don't have a hardware group to help them get it out there.
Now, this mapping technology, I've seen it surface here and there, and people who really know what they're talking about, such as yourself, say the same thing you're saying, which is just incredibly good technology. And this is really hard stuff. I mean, to develop a map, as Apple has learned, developing any sort of mapping, global mapping technology is difficult, and to develop a really good one is harder still. And so, how would they get this out more into the public? Do you think that they're going to start aggressively pursuing partnerships with handset makers now that these other handset makers aren't competitors?
I think they kind of have to. When they launched the Here brand, which I think was year before last, they kind of tried to whip a lot of excitement about the brand, and you haven't seen all that much happen with it so far. But they are one of the very few companies that actually does things like send out cars onto the streets with cameras to capture, street view type information. Almost everybody else has to license their data from other folks, and Nokia actually collects data.
Interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Nokia and also what happens with the handset business that used to be belonging to Nokia under Microsoft's control. Right now, the future, anything could happen. It's Microsoft's to succeed with or fail with in terms of the handset division. So we'll see what happens there. Well, Samsung unveiled its Galaxy K zoom camera phone. It's really a camera that happens to have an Android phone built in. The phone has a retractable 10x zoom lens and a 20.7 megapixel camera inside. Harry, I love these kind of devices, and I frankly always get jealous whenever I see these really high-quality camera smartphones. I love taking smartphone pictures. I'm never satisfied with the quality. And tragically, this device is not headed for the U.S. They have not announced any plans to release this in the United States or even abroad, as I understand it. It's almost like a proof of concept of some kind. Why do you think they do that? Are these not these kinds of phones, camera phone type things, not something that are going to be for the mainstream consumers?
Well, they're Samsung, so they're good at trying anything and everything and seeing what sticks. To me, the single reason why you might want a device like this is because of that zoom lens. The sensors in smartphones have gotten amazingly good. The software is very sophisticated. But when you make a phone super thin, you can't put in the zoom lens, and that sort of is the one possibility for this category catching on. I kind of feel, though, that that's not going to give it long-term viability. And a week or two ago, we saw HTC talking about how they have some kind of secret technology up their sleeve to either put a zoom lens into a smartphone or do something comparable to it. And the moment you can either do an optical zoom in a smartphone or a good imitation of it with a digital zoom, I think this category that Samsung's playing with kind of doesn't have a place to go.
Yeah, as you said, it's difficult to build a lens like this into a thin phone, and this one is twice as thick as the Galaxy S5. So it's a serious commitment to be carrying this thing around in your pocket because it's significantly thicker and heavier than smartphones are these days. And of course, Apple's going to be pushing the envelope apparently with increasingly, as they always do, increasingly thin phones. And so, we'll see where this goes. People clearly want high-quality photographs, and maybe the high-end photos that you're able to get with a thin phone are good enough for consumers, because after all, a lot of these pictures just go into Facebook, which will compress them down to horrible-looking photos anyway. So I guess for the average consumer, what's the big deal? But it's interesting to see.
So. The world is kind of splintered into smartphones and really high-end cameras, and there's less and less space in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Still, I lust for a camera phone that has, some of the capabilities of the high-end camera Nokia phones, plus the Moto X, automatic, always listening kind of functionality, and all those other things that come with the Moto X. Plus some other qualities. If some of these features could all be put in the same phone, I pretty much pay almost anything for it. But you always have to choose between either some great feature or some other great feature. It's impossible to find a phone with all the best features, and I think there's a big market for that if anybody ever decides to do something like that. I love these high-end camera phones. Well, Google added a new feature to Google Glass that gives you information about things nearby with a voice command. The new top-level command is, "OK Glass, explore nearby." That launches the Field Trip app, which checks your location, then searches the Field Trip database for points of interest nearby, businesses, historical events in the area, that sort of thing. The app might be the original Google Glass app, oddly enough. It was developed before even the Google Glass Explorer program launched, but because Glass wasn't ready, Google launched it first as an iOS and Android app, and then later Google folded it into Google Glass as a hobbled glassware app. Today, it finally becomes what it was originally intended to be, which is a top-level app for glass that's part of the core feature set. I'm fascinated by this, Harry McCracken. As a user on iOS of the Field Trip app, and then later of the hobbled version on Google Glass, the idea is so great. So, as I understand the idea, they search for databases, extensible databases that are cultivated by various people, historical societies, restaurant databases, whatever, and then they fold them in. This news today, they announced, in addition to the fact that it now is controllable by voice commands at the top level of Google Glass, they announced 200 more publisher databases. So if you go to, you go to New York City or something like that, there are New York City specific databases that are maintained by people who have an interest in the preservation of knowledge about New York City. And same thing with places all over the world. And so you can see where this could go in like 3 or 4 or 5 years, where you have a lot more databases and Google Glass becomes a lot less clunky and awkward looking, and even this functionality could be built into a wristwatch. It could be great to just walk around and just have this knowledge about what's around you constantly coming into your attention.
Well, Field Trip is an interesting app, and it's from an interesting company. It's from a company called Niantic Labs, which is a startup that happens to be owned by Google. I haven't really seen too many people cover this, but it's a small company. It's separate from Google X and from Android and the other parts of the company. But they built this app, which you mentioned, Field Trip, which is very nice. And it's completely logical. This should be part of Google Glass. It kind of shouldn't be a standalone thing. And they're finally doing it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people report this is that it's a Google product, but as you point out, the Niantic Labs is a very, very independent company. It just happens to be owned by Google, although clearly they're on board with the whole Google Glass program in terms of like understanding what's needed. I mean, we talk about augmented reality, and augmented reality is always expressed as, you look at something and in your field of view you have information around the periphery of your vision describing what you're looking at. This is really close to that. It doesn't require that you look at the object or the building or the location that you're getting information about, but it will make sure that it's nearby. I've used this on Google Glass walking around, and the typical thing in a small town that you get is restaurants. So I'll be walking by and blink, a thing pops up and tells me about some restaurant. Not super helpful, but in a larger city, you get all kinds of historical things. There are databases that include things like locations for movies. So you'll be walking down the street and the thing will pop up and say, this is where a scene in When Harry Met Sally was filmed, or something like that. And it's just kind of fascinating. And you can see as they refine this how great that will be to just have this kind of knowledge handed to you that will almost feel like your own knowledge because of the intimacy of a wearable device. Well, Amazon.com today announced a new online store dedicated to wearable computing. The store, which is found at Amazon.com/wearable technology, has a pretty broad definition for wearable computing, a definition that includes GoPro cameras and stuff like that. The store also plans to sell bona fide wearable technologies like Samsung smartwatches, Jawbone fitness bands, and the Narrative Clip life logging camera. The site also includes a learning center with product videos and buying guides. And Harry McCracken, they seem to have a relationship with, I think, Gizmodo for gadget articles and things like that. So this, to me, is an indication as good as any other that wearables are now mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon doesn't do this kind of stuff unless they see a large market. One thing I'm still curious about, though, is whether kind of normal, everyday people see wearable as a category and whether they'll call it wearable. And as I write about devices in this category, I kind of mull over whether I should be talking about wearables and assuming people will know what I mean and care. And I'm still not sure about that. But Amazon doing that is certainly an interesting data point.
Yeah, I think that at this point, my guess is, my prediction is that wearable will not survive as a discrete category, that there'll be subcategories branching off. And you already see it branching off in the wrist devices. Already people used to say, a wrist computer is a wearable device, and now we have smartwatches and smart bracelets or fitness band type devices
fitness
that are
bands,
not quite. Yeah. And then Google talks about clothing devices built into clothes or clipping on clothes. These are going to spin out. You and I have been around long enough to remember multimedia as a category of device. And that just became ridiculous after a while, and everybody stopped saying it because everything...
I wrote about a smart ring today from a company called Odd Labs.
Yeah. I personally think that the ring technologies are going nowhere because I don't think people want to wear a ring. I don't think that's far from a mainstream usage. Still interesting in terms of its miniaturization. And of course, in-the-air gesture control is something that's definitely got a strong future. And we're going to be talking about a product from Microsoft in just a sec in that category. But there it is, folks. Amazon is now selling wearable computing in its own wearable computing store. We'll be following it to see what they categorize as wearable computing and see if they can really help cultivate this market. Well, Acer announced a new flagship smartphone today and a wearable wrist device to go with it. The phone is called the Liquid Jade, and the smart band is called the Liquid Leap for some reason. Acer didn't reveal a lot of the details about either device, no specs, ship dates, or prices, but the phone looks like a 5-inch screen device, and the wearable is more of a fitness band than a smartwatch. Why even announce this, Harry McCracken, if you're not going to give any details? It's kind of frustrating, and these devices don't, at first blush, look especially exceptional. So I don't know. It just seems like they're a little late to at least the wearables market.
Well, I mean, Acer is the kind of company that they're never going to be the first to create anything, but they do love to jump on bandwagons, and wearables are a hot bandwagon right now. Although the dynamic is kind of odd, because at the same time that Acer is jumping into smartwatches, there was all the news a few days ago about Nike pulling out of the fitness band market. And my guess is a lot of the companies that are getting into wearables right now will get out again at some point. You're not going to see every company and its brother in this category. You'll kind of see a few leaders doing it.
Absolutely. And these fitness bands seem to me like a bit of a faddish gimmick, because at first people want to get in shape. And so the first thing that we tend to do when we want to get a shape is buy something. So you buy one of these things, and it's essentially a pedometer, and some of them can monitor your sleep and stuff like that. But after a while, it doesn't get you in better shape. It doesn't make you more healthy. You have to go exercise and eat better. And so the fitness bands, I think, are just going to, some of that functionality built into smart devices. You see Samsung already building it into smartphones and stuff. I just don't see that as a legitimate category for people who don't have medical issues and that sort of thing. Well, before we get to Microsoft's gesture device that I hinted at earlier, I want to first tell you about ZipRecruiter. If you're going to hire people, and of course, if you own a small business or if you're a hiring manager, you know that hiring people is the single most important thing you do, because if you hire really, really good people, whatever it is you're working on or whatever it is, whatever company you own is going to succeed. And if you hire people who are not so hot, then you're going to be struggling, fighting with it forever. So you really want to make sure that you hire the very best people. So how do you do that? The problem is that people are scattered. The job candidates, the people looking for work, are scattered all over the place. There are so many job boards out there, more than you can count. And people are also using social networks for putting up their eligibility for various jobs. And that's where ZipRecruiter.com comes in. You can post to 50 plus job sites all at once with a single click. That's right, one click, and you are putting your information on all of these 50 plus sites. They also post your job on social networks like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. It's a fantastic tool, but there's a problem. If you are casting such a wide net looking for the best candidates, you're going to get the best candidates, but you're also going to get lots and lots of people who are not such great candidates because you're casting that wide net. ZipRecruiter helps you with that as well. What they do is they simply automatically highlight the best candidates for you, so you can zero in on those who are genuinely qualified for the job that you posted. And then you can screen them, rate them, and then hire the right person fast. It's a fantastic service, and I recommend it very, very highly. Try ZipRecruiter and find out why they've been used by over 100,000 businesses. Right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for a free 4-day trial by going to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of Tech News Today. Well, Microsoft is working on a keyboard that detects both touch and in-the-air gestures. Their research project is called the Type Hover Switch in 96 bytes, and that is an example of why you don't let engineers name your project. The keyboard has a 16:4 grid of 64 low-resolution infrared proximity sensors between the keys and facing up. That's right, between the keys you have these sensors, a whole bunch of them, pointing straight up, looking at your hands and fingers. And it comes with gesture recognition algorithms that interpret in-the-air gestures and also touch gestures as commands. So just moving your hand over the keys lets you navigate whatever it is you're looking at. And you can even hold an invisible steering wheel over the keyboard for a driving game, and it can be controlled with this invisible steering wheel. Pretty fascinating technology. The keyboard actually looks like kind of like an Apple Bluetooth keyboard. And in related news, Mary Jo Foley reported this morning that Microsoft has launched a special projects group inside Microsoft Research whose mission is to work on, quote, disruptive technologies that could benefit the company and society, unquote. I guess that's kind of like Google X Labs, and I'm sure Mary Jo will go into details on this news during tomorrow's Windows Weekly show at 11 a.m. Pacific here on the TWiT network. Harry McCracken, this is, Microsoft Research has been such a source of frustration for so many years because they create such incredible technology, and you wait and wait and wait for it to become a product, and then where is it? And hopefully the main emphasis of this new division that they have is to ship it, get into a real product.
Yeah, I mean, I worry a little bit about what little we know about this new division, because it sounds a little bit like them looking at Google X and saying we should be doing that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, Microsoft Research has never lacked for really smart people doing really interesting things. I remember they were doing great stuff with voice recognition 15 years ago. And yet Microsoft doesn't control voice recognition, even though they build it into Office and a lot of stuff, and people sort of forgot about that because they couldn't figure out how to take that technology and put it into something that people wanted.
I remember touring Microsoft Research several times and being completely blown away by what they're working on. Not only their solving of the problems, but the problems it is that they identified. Let me just give you one quick example. They identified a reticence to use video conferencing at that time because they determined that people need eye contact when they interact. And when you do a video conference, the camera is over here, and then you look at the screen over here, and there's no eye contact, and so it's not as satisfying psychologically as a face-to-face meeting. And the way that they solved this problem is they had two cameras. They created a 3D map of the person's face and appearance, and then mapped the actual the texture of the person's actual photography onto this 3D model, and enabled you to have a conversation with this 3D super realistic avatar that you could make eye contact with. And both people could do this, and they found it to be very fascinating. It was all with off-the-shelf technology. There was nothing fancy. They were using, PCs from 12 years ago or something like that. And it never came anywhere. And as you said, voice recognition, also voice speech recognition. They had a speech engine that would speak text in anybody's voice. Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, JFK, they just turn on a voice and it would be that person. It could even be your voice. It would learn your voice and then it'd read it in very natural language. This is years and years ago, and it never went anywhere, and still to this day we don't have anything like that. So it is frustrating, and I hope that this indicates a new emphasis under the new regime at Microsoft on research and making it super relevant, and also, importantly, getting it to market. Harry McCracken, I want to thank you for coming on Tech News today and sharing your insights with us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. It's always fun.
All right, and where can people find you and your work?
If you can check out technologizer.com to see all my stuff on time.com, or just go to time.com to see all of our stuff.
All right, wonderful. And you're also at Twitter at Harry McCracken. Well, thanks again. All right, well, watch for eBay and Twitter earnings today. Don't miss tomorrow's episode of Tech News Today, because we're going to cover the F8 event, Facebook's big announcement event, tomorrow live at 10 a.m. Pacific. And we want you to subscribe to Tech News Today, and appreciate it if you do so. twit.tv/TNT is where you can subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. And we want to hear from you. Send an email at tnt@twit.tv or leave us a voicemail by calling 260-TNT-SHOW. I've really been enjoying the voicemails that some of you have been leaving, so please don't hesitate to do that. Also, don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight. My name's Mike Elgin. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.